Hey everybody, Alex Comstock here with WhitetailDNA, and on this video I'm going to talk about multi versus single pin for archery hunting. I'm pretty much on this video just going to talk through your different options, your pros and your cons for each, what I'm running, and honestly this video is going to have a large part of just me trying to help decide myself what I want to do this year, because I've been kind of switching it up. This past fall we partnered with Redline Bow Hunting, and Redline offers a whole bunch of different sights, from single pin to like a double single pin to multi-pin sliders. So I'm just going to kind of run through your different options, the pros and the cons, like I said, of each, and some things to be thinking about if you're deciding to get a new sight. Before we jump into the video, I'm going to ask a big favor: hit that like and subscribe button below, share the video. If you do want to check out any of the sites from Redline Bow Hunting, link is in the description. And with that, let's jump into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is just your straight. We'll get into the double pin and we'll get into the sliders and everything on the multi-pin, but right now I just want to jump into straight single versus multi-pin and kind of the differences. So the single pin, obviously you've got one pin and you've got a sight tape and you can adjust the yardage to which that pin's set at. And a single pin, in my opinion, is really good for a couple different things. First of all, it's really good for target shooting, in the sense that if you're out shooting a bunch of 3D in the summer and maybe you want to shoot at long distances, single pin's great for that. And it's also great if you think you're going to be shooting far distances come fall. Maybe you're someone that hunts in open terrain, maybe you hunt out west a lot, whatever the case may be. If you think you're going to be consistently shooting over, I would say 50 yards, then a single pin might be more towards you, because when you get to a further distance, you need to be dialed into the yard, right? Or if you've got a whitetail at say 24 yards, you can gap shoot that, and you're as long as you know where kind of everything's going to be and where to gap shoot, you're going to be fine. But if you've got a whitetail or a mule deer at 76 yards, well, it's kind of hard just to gap shoot that, and you really want to dial that single pin right into the yardage, and it's going to make your chances of ethical shot much higher. So that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind on a single pin sight. The next thing is, like, your housing is much cleaner. So like here with multi-pin, you've got pins stacked up in your line of sight in your housing, and it can get confusing for some people. And you can, in the heat of the moment, you might be like, shoot, which pin? Just when you've got a big buck coming in, your mind's racing at 1,000 miles an hour. Whereas when you're out target shooting, it's like obvious. It's up, the yellow pin's 40, whatever. So with a single pin, your line of sight's a lot cleaner. Just that sight picture is a lot cleaner. There's not as much going on. It can be easier to stay organized. And then with that, I want to jump in just a couple of the cons on the single pin. The biggest one being having to adjust it, in the fact that what I'm getting at is, say a deer comes in, he's coming down the trail, you think he's gonna end up at 20, so you dial your sight into 20 yards. He's coming, and then where you think he's gonna cut into 20, maybe he skirts out or hits the other trail, and now all of a sudden he's at 32 and you're already at full draw. Well, that can put you in a pickle. And unless you're really good at practicing and knowing where to kind of aim with that pin, if you've got it set for 20 and to shoot for 30, it can get you in a hairy spot. And that happened to me in a little bit different scenario, but in 2021, the buck that I killed, Squiggly, I had been practicing out in the night before at 25, and just had a boneheaded move, forgot to change my sight tape back to 20, because I just leave it at 20 all the time. Well, the next morning I'm in a tree, buck comes in 18 yards, I'm frazzled, I don't even look at my sight tape, and it's at 25, and I shoot at 18 downhill, and I shoot way high. I ended up getting them, but just stuff like that can definitely happen more often with a single pin, and you need to be on your P's and Q's. You definitely need to be on your game and just always making sure that it's set exactly to where you want it. And it can cause issues, but it's also, like I said before, you can really dial it into, if you've got a 27-yard shot or a 34-yard shot, right? You can really just crank it right to the exact yardage, and you should be perfect. And some people like just having that one pin to focus on. They're not going to be confused. They don't have to look at numerous pins. And that's kind of my thoughts on the single pin. When it comes to a multi-pin, which I switched back to this past fall, the multi-pin's nice because you got for me, I got my 20, 30, 40, 50, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60 yard pin. So I've got 5 pins in there, which is a decent amount. But if I'm at full, the biggest thing for me is I don't have to monkey with anything when the deer's coming in. And so buck's coming in, I'm at full draw, think I'm gonna have a 25-yard shot. Well, now he jumps out to 35. I just adjust my aim. I don't have to touch anything. And I can just, you know, have my housing like that. To this point, I don't mind having, you know, numerous pins in the housing. And I think I've preferred, you know, going back to a multi-pin. But again, my hunting is all, you know, tight quarters roughly. I mean, North Dakota, I can get into some long shots, but I'm not shooting a whitetail over 50 yards anyway. I'm just not that great of an archer, and there's just a lot that can go wrong. But I'll consistently practice out to 60 and further and beyond. And this is a slider, which we'll get into here a little bit more, but having the numerous pins is really nice. Some downsides, again, kind of like what I talked about, is there's a lot going on in here. But the biggest downside for me is that, and is you can't dial in the exact yardage. So, like for me, I shoot a little bit of a heavier arrow. I've got 420 some grains, I think my arrow comes out to. So I've got a little bit of a pretty good gap between my 30 and 40 yard pin, and then it kind of actually evens out a little bit more. But so 35 is like, if I'd way rather have a deer at 40 than 35. It's quite a decent gap. And you know, so if you're gonna gap shoot at 35, you know, whereas if you had a single pin, you could just dial that in at 35 and you're good to go. But on the flip side, if I had a deer coming in that I thought was gonna be a different yardage and he ends up at 35, now I can just gap shoot it. And I would rather be in that situation opposed to being in a situation where now I have to try to let down and spin my dial to 35 and whatnot. So with a single spin sight, there are ones that are like double pins, right? So it's still like one vertical pin, but halfway up there's another marker, and it's called a double pin. And like for Redline makes one of these called the torch sight, which was just released last year, which is really sweet. And what this does, it kind of acts as a single pin sight, right? So you're still doing everything like you would a single pin, but what it does is having that pin right, you know, halfway up on the vertical axis, is if you're at full draw and say you got that set for 20, well now that bottom pin essentially is usually going to be set for, you know, you can change it to 10 yards to 15 yards. You kind of got to do some practice to figure where it's at, but it's kind of like, I think of it as like your backup pin. You know, something happens, it's so you don't have to spin it and, you know, let down, so you kind of got that backup, you know, pin on the bottom, so it still acts as a single pin. You've got all the pros of the single pin. You know, you pretty much just have to practice and figure out at this yardage the bottom pin's this, or if it's always 10 yards further. And just kind of figure that out given on, you know, your setup, your bow speed, your arrow weight, all that good stuff. So definitely, if you want kind of the best of both worlds on a single pin, I would recommend going to something like the torch sight from Redline. And I'm sure other brands make it as well, something similar anyway. Or if you want the best of both worlds, but you want to have a multi-pin, you can get a multi-slider. So that's actually what I ran this year. It's the RL2 5-pin slider. So as you see, I've got all my pins, and now I can take and still spin it and adjust it down. So what this allows me to do is work this bow or work this sight just like a multi-pin sight, just like normal. But if I want to dial it in, so if I know this buck's coming, he's gonna be at 35, and I feel super confident about that, I can turn and use my top pin as my single pin and crank that down to 35. Or what I like about this is what I would do more often is for the long range stuff, right? Again, I'm not shooting a whitetail probably past 50, but when it comes to summertime 3D, I like to shoot out 60, 70, 80. And so now I can still use my 5-pin, I can take and I can crank her down to, you know, whatever exact yardage. And if you're hunting out west, you can do the same thing. So really in this day and age, there's so many different sights you can get that kind of comes with, what I'm trying to say here is you can kind of get whatever you want out of it. And it's really, I'm trying to figure out what I want to switch to this year, or if I want to keep what I've got. I do like the multi-pin, but I also do like the thought of the double pin vertical. So I think if I'm this year, honestly, I'm probably either gonna keep with what I've got, or I'm gonna switch to the torch. I don't think I could see myself doing just a straight single pin again. For whatever reason, I didn't like it. I shot a single pin for 3 or 4 years, and when I came back to the multi-pin, it's what I liked. You know, I prefer that, and being able to slide it if need be is kind of the best of both worlds. So I can treat this top pin as my single pin and still slide it into the exact yardage, or just shoot it like a multi-pin. So in my personal opinion, I would say, now that I'm just talking out loud, a multi-pin slider is probably the best bet for me as I'd call myself a close proximity whitetail hunter. But again, you got to kind of just look at your variables of what you're hunting, everything that goes into that before you make your decision. So that's all I got for you on talking through kind of the single versus multi-pin sights. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, if you want to check out any of Redline bow hunting sites, hit that link in the description. Do me a huge favor, hit that like and subscribe. And we got a lot more videos coming. I was supposed to be in Nebraska this week, but now I'm headed to Nebraska next week with just some weather and stuff. So I'll be down there the first week of May, and I'll be doing some more turkey hunting with Caleb. And then before you know it, we're finally losing snow up here in northern Minnesota. It's about all gone. So I need to get out there and do a little scouting. Before you know it, summer is gonna be here and we'll be rolling right into fall. So appreciate you watching. Hopefully see you here on the next video.